Greetings, hello, good day, wherever you are in the world. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Truehope Cast, the official Truehope Canada podcast. My name is Simon and I am your host. If you are unfamiliar with Truehope Canada, we are a mind and body based supplement company that is dedicated first and foremost to promoting brain and body health through non-invasive nutritional means. Now more than ever, people are looking for ways to support their brain health. And this is a huge part of what we are always doing at Truehope Canada. And for more information about us, you can go to truehopecanada.com. We've got a beautiful new website you can check out. And we are on all the usual social media sites. So you can go and check us out there as well. It is my absolute pleasure today to introduce today's guest, yoga teacher and holistic nutritionist, Nicole Sampson. Nicole first started practicing yoga in 2010 when she was encouraged to explore the practice while working for Lululemon. As she dove deeper into the practice, Nicole found what a gift this practice could be on her path of self-discovery. This led Nicole to take her first 200 hours of teacher training in 2014, and she has since taken teacher training every 1 to 2 years. Nicole is currently working on her 300-hour training with Clara Roberts, with plans to be a 500-hour practitioner by the end of 2021. That is a lot of hours. That's just amazing. And as the importance of her study of yoga grew and other holistic sciences like Ayurveda, this drew Nicole towards the study of holistic nutrition. And in April of 2020, Nicole graduated from the Holistic Nutrition Program at Pacific Rim College, which is the most comprehensive on-site program of holistic nutrition in Canada. It's a quite remarkable institution. We've spoken about it many times on the show. She plans to combine these two modalities, yoga and holistic nutrition, to show others how they can care for themselves with movement and food. Alongside yoga, Nicole has spent the last 10 years working in her community, building and leadership development. Nicole brings her strength in positivity and as a compassionate leader in everything that she does. And in her spare time, you can find Nicole hiking with her amazing partner, Liam, and their pretty new dog, Angus. Hi, Nicole. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you?
Hi, Simon. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm doing great.
That's awesome. Now, I've got to disclose something. Nicole is one of my favorite people on the planet.
I could say the same about you, Simon. Thank you.
That's nice. Yeah, we are very close friends, and you can take my word for it that Nicole is a incredibly special person with her, and her heart and her love for what she does is quite remarkable. It continues to surprise me all the time. So Nicole, would you be so kind as to give us a little bit of an introduction into your journey into becoming a practitioner and a teacher?
Yeah, definitely. You definitely gave me a great intro there with my bio. I feel bad that it was quite long, so thank you for reading that.
It's a long bio. It's
And
good. Yeah, you've obviously got a lot of stuff going on. It's great.
yeah, and I was thinking about recently my very first introduction to yoga, and it must have been when I was in high school and we had like a yoga DVD at my house. It was me, my sisters, and my mom's, and I did a class and it was very slow. And at that point, I was like, I'm not into this yoga. Like, I played team sports growing up, baseball and basketball, so I was into more high-paced movement. So that first introduction, I was like, no, yoga is not for me. It's a bit too slow, a bit too boring at that point. I kind of was written off. And then it was a little bit after high school, as Simon had mentioned there, that I started working for the company Lululemon, who um, was making clothes for yoga. So that was a big part of working for the company. It's an encouragement to start practicing yoga. And what was so great is they offered us the opportunity to look at a variety of different styles. So they really encouraged you to find the style that was best for you. And it was kind of years into starting to practice that I found this one studio and I found this practice that was quite vigorous. And it really intrigued me, having played more higher intensity sports, that having a challenging practice was really exciting to me. It was something that I could work towards, postures that I had never done before in my body. It kind of motivated me to learn more about the practice. And then alongside that vigorous practice was this introduction to some breathing techniques and meditation. So it was the Sattva Practice Studio out of Edmonton, Alberta, that really drew me in at the beginning and showed me that there was more to this practice than my first intro of a very slow yoga DVD that I had first practice. And from there, it was also at a time in my life where I had thought I really wanted to support people and help them by going into nursing and being in that more Western model of healthcare. And in there, I was really seeing how we care for people in the kind of last stage of intervention. So when people are quite sick and they need the surgery, they need the pharmaceuticals. I know there's a time and place for Western medicine and it does amazing things. But what I felt was really missing there was more conversation about what people could do for themselves, how they could help themselves. And I was really seeing that with yoga, how I could keep my body physically fit. And I was introducing this practice of meditation in where I was looking a bit deeper into my own experience. And so from there, I was kind of hooked and I was like, I want to find out more about this. And I went on to do my first teacher training um, as a way that I was curious for myself as to how this practice could continue to support me. And being that I saw as a way that I could help people sooner. So instead of being in that Western model of last resort healthcare, I could be in this practice, in this area of health promotion where we're showing people how to care for themselves at any stage of their life and continue to keep themselves healthy. So that's kind of how I first got started in becoming a teacher. And as you had mentioned, Simon, I have done a teacher training every like 1 to 2 years since then. And that I feel like is important to note because this is a 1,000-year-old system that we're learning about this yoga practice. So there's so much to learn, so much to explore within the practice. And also being in a teacher training is such a magical experience. It's not only taking you out of your everyday life where you have your job, your responsibilities, your family, all these things that a lot of people hopefully you enjoy to do and you have a lot expected of you and you get to go away and kind of be on retreat where you're just solely focused on yourself and caring for yourself with this practice, focusing more intentionally on what you're putting in your body and you're moving yourself from all those other responsibilities so that you can just be in this experience for you. So I think that's what's so great about the yoga practice and what continues to bring me back into learning about it, taking trainings, studying myself, and then bringing this practice to other people.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's such an important point is that, you know, anyone who really gets into yoga is certainly exploring the practice of yoga and the moves and the breath work and everything that kind of comes with that. But also what people I think are doing are exploring themselves and really
Yeah.
getting connected with who they are and what this incredible body can do and what the mind can do once the mind and body are connected with conscious breath, conscious work, conscious thinking. And the things that you're mentioning about like our work and our significant external distractions always ends up depleting us. So using yoga to explore that as a really ancient magical practice that is definitely coming, let's call it, back into society, into our Western cultures a little bit more. But yeah, like, and side by side with that is the fact that we are exploring ourselves again. We are exploring what it is to be a spiritual, energetic being, and that is, yeah, it's one of the best things that I've ever learned about what yoga is. Definitely much more
Mhm.
than going to a yoga studio and getting on the mat, and then trying to stretch as much as I possibly can. It's so much deeper than that, and that's a really cool, amazing thing that people can do as a self discovery practice.
Yeah, there was a few things you said there that I wanted to touch on. Um, is I was listening to one of my teachers recently. She has a podcast as well where she talks a lot about yoga, and she was saying, she said it so beautifully that often yoga teachers are trying to work themselves out of a job because we want students to come in and get this introduction and then have them get to the point where they're comfortable exploring it on their own. So, very much that path to self discovery, learning more about ourselves is we. It's so great to find a teacher that you really resonate with and who is going to be sharing this material in a way that works best for you. And then it gets to the point where you take it on yourself.
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's wonderful. And yeah,
Yeah.
just as any really good therapy that really supports you, community is a massive factor of that. So whether you are going to, you know, a a space where you've got other people there who are doing yoga with you, I think it's so wonderful when you join up with a community of people who are doing something to benefit themselves and the people around them, and you know, energy feeds off
Hmm.
energy. So yeah, not only are you, when you start engaging in a yoga practice, you're benefiting yourself, but you're gonna exceed that benefit by, you know, working and being with other people who are also kind of making that self commitment to themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was kind of another piece that you touched on is that there's so many different paths to the way people can get introduced to yoga. So oftentimes in our Western culture here in North America, people get introduced to the physical poses first. And that's great for people to join in that way. And then eventually they get into more of the philosophy and the 8 limbs of Ashtanga yoga are such an amazing resource to us because they talk about the physical practice as one of the 8 limbs, but the before that we look at the qualities of how we interact with our environment and how we interact with ourselves. So some of those things are um, a truthfulness, so being true to yourself, being true to others. They are cleanliness with your environment, with yourself, your contentment, um, amazing principles, the yamas and yamas of yoga. So that's such a great way to explore this practice in its whole, in its entirety. And there's so many different ways that people can start with it. And then it is endless where it takes you.
Yeah, that's lovely. I think there was something you said at the beginning about your experience when you were first introduced to yoga with your sister and your mum, who are probably going to listen to this, and I want to say hi to because they're both awesome.
Thank
But
you.
yeah, it's so interesting that, you know, when we are at this kind of like young age, let's just call it like in our 20s, when a lot of people are doing a lot more, you know, go high energy sports and activities and movements, and then the idea of, you know, being on a yoga mat and doing something that's a lot more, let's call it slow and maybe deliberate and conscious, is not quite the it's not quite in line with, you know, what a high energy 20-year-old is going to want to do. So in your experience, like how how have you seen that transition kind of work
Mm.
in a way that, you know, it's wonderful that people have got all this incredible energy and they want to do all these wonderful things and use their bodies, but as we say, it's so important that we rest and restore and replenish and balance using something like yoga or meditation. How have you seen that transition work for that kind of that group that I'm talking about?
Yeah, that's such a great question. And I think that's what's so amazing about the yoga practice and where we are right now in the West as well too is we have so many different styles of yoga now that have been born out of this one system. You know, we have one teacher that has their students, and then their students start teaching other students. And from there, we've now developed all these different styles of practice. So I think there is really a practice for everyone at different stages of their life. So often we see that younger stages of our life, we are more energetic, our bodies may be lighter, maybe more flexible, that a higher energy practice could really benefit. And then later in our life, as we get older, we get a little bit weaker, we get slower. The slower practices could really benefit us. And we can even look into different seasons too and see how the winter and the darkness and the heaviness of it, the slower practice can really benefit us. And then as we move into spring, which I feel like here in Victoria, it's so sunny today, and I'm so feeling that the spring is coming, even though it's a bit too early. But and when we get into the spring, we can start bringing in those more vigorous practices and start moving the body, helping to move the digestion and kind of bring that heat in. And then even different times of the day we can look at, like maybe in the morning you can do a more vigorous practice, in the evening you can do a slower practice. So there is a practice for every body at every stage, every season, every hour of the day. I think it's like there's so much out there that we can access. And at the same time, it's so interesting, especially in our Western world here, that's very, I think what you really spoke to, high intensity. There's a lot going on. There can be increased levels of stress and pressure within our jobs and our responsibilities, that the slowing down can be such a great counter to that lifestyle. And it can be really uncomfortable at first, the slower movement. I think that's what I experienced initially, was the slower movement was uncomfortable, but it could be really beneficial for me. So I think there's like a balance there between matching our energy at the certain time and then also the counter. So if we are very energetic, how can we find that balance in a slower practice, finding our meditation and sitting there in the quiet longer, and how that can actually benefit and balance out the heat, the intensity that we have in other areas of their life. So it's so interesting because I feel like I can be quite an energetic, higher intensity individual. And I like those practices, and the slower practices like a yin yoga where you could be holding poses for like 8 to 10 minutes at a time. I often find I'm in those practices being like, what's next? What's next? And then it's like, oh, this is so good for me.
Yeah.
I can be in this, and like, how much do I need this right now when I have the desire to move away from it?
Yeah,
Mhm.
I think that's so great because one of the biggest things yoga can do is bring consciousness and awareness to kind of like where you are and your present moment, and your practice and what you do with your body and how you use your resources um, is really important. And yeah, age, season, your energy levels, your stress levels, all these things you can become hyper aware of when you're really using your conscious mind. And the yoga practice and what you want to bring to the mat will change depending on all of those circumstances. So yeah, it's really a great way to kind of holistically look at kind of like where you are, where you want to be. And yoga's got so many incredible options for all of those different circumstances.
Yeah, and just on that point too, it can often be intimidating for people to go into a studio when they're first starting and know what type of practice to join into. And I feel like the best teachers are going to give options to everybody in the room. So even if you go into a practice and you thought more vigorous is good for you today, and then you get in there and you're like, absolutely not, you can do what feels best for you in that moment too. Like, I'm so happy if people come into my class and it's planned on being a more vigorous practice, and many people are into that and are moving with it. And then one person lays down and they just listen to the practice and they just breathe with us. They're still in the practice and they're still getting the benefits from it. One of my great teachers too, Clara, often suggests that you do some practices lying in Shavasana the whole time and just visualize yourself doing the poses and see how much benefit you can still get from that. So I just thought that like that was so important to offer to people too, is that if you start to do a practice and then feel like that's not the right practice for you in that moment, you can change it. You can switch it up right in there and do what's best for you.
Yeah, I on my yoga journey, I certainly had that. Like some of my first experiences was going into a class with a lot of people, and
Mm,
my let's call it old personality of being quite I played competitive sports my whole life, and I definitely ran on a lot more ego than I do now. So I'm sat in this room with a bunch of different people, and you're going to engage in that environment, depending on that environment, with lots of other people who have very varied levels of competence when it comes to yoga. But I'm trying to do my best, and I'm trying to do exactly what the
mhm,
teacher's telling me, and doing all these things. And then when you become conscious of the fact that you're probably straining yourself and you're not really breathing because you're trying to hold this, that really that whole journey, when I first started going to classes, and I really started to figure out that I was getting that it wasn't really me, that like kind of egotistical, frustrated individual, like trying to do everything
mhm.
I suppose with a competitive nature, that was just never really benefiting me. But now, like going to a yoga class, it's not necessarily about doing exactly the sequence of what the teacher's doing, but being able to put yourself in a position where you can actually feel what your body needs in that moment. And yeah, if it's to um, lie down in Shavasana for 40 minutes, then that's your thing. Like, go for that. And I think for a lot of
Yeah,
people to lie down still with their own thoughts and their own mind and their own breath, like that is one of the most difficult yoga practices that you can engage in.
totally. Yeah, and that's such a good point. I think for a lot of people who don't know a lot about yoga, their first introduction is seeing a super bendy, often white female body on like things like the yoga journal or on Instagram. And they have a lot of fear around the yoga and yeah, a lot of ego around like, I want to look like that. I want to be able to do that. And they could push themselves into harm getting into the practice and trying to go too far too soon. So it is sometimes challenging to really bring in um, that the practice is whatever it needs to be for you today. A lot of times people want to get really stuck on how it should look. And like you said, Simon, it's all about how it feels in the body. And I think the more that you tap into how it feels, the stronger you get and the better you can move into increasing flexibility as well. So there's definitely, I think, a time period there that some people take where they have to move from like how should it look to how it feels. But I feel like over in the West here, we're placing more emphasis on that. And we're showing many different bodies now doing the yoga and looking at how does the shape look in different bodies. And I think it's so important to remind people too that everyone's coming into the practice, especially like in a yoga studio, however many bodies in one space doing the one practice that the teacher's offering. Everyone's coming in with like different injuries, different energy levels, different states of like emotion, coming in with so many different things that it's a crazy expectation that everyone's going to be doing the same pose and it's going to look the same way. That's completely unrealistic because everyone's coming in with all these different experiences. So I think really empowering people to honor that, honor your energy level, honoring whether your body's sore or it's feeling open and energetic, and honor what's coming up in your mind too. It's very much like a mind, body, soul practice.
Yeah, that's really great. And I
Mm,
think, yeah, it's just everybody's journey in most things is wildly different. And
mhm.
hopefully that people are able to experience, especially like having a good teacher, having a good instructor to kind of navigate the class, and talk about those type of expectations, and be really
Yeah.
clear with the type of movement that's happening. I think I've had some amazing yoga teachers, but I've also had some really bad ones.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's obviously a,
Yeah.
a big part to play. How have you seen yoga support mental health in people?
Great question. Yeah, actually, I'm sure there's so many things that I can offer and share over the years, but one thing sticking out to me is last week, actually, someone came to my class, and when she realized I was the teacher, she said, I just want to share with you how my day has been. And she shared that she actually had a panic attack that morning and had planned on going to a yoga class, but just couldn't get herself there because of this panic attack. And throughout the course of the day, she was able to get into a more relaxed state, more calm, and then come to the class that evening because she still knew the benefit of the yoga practice for her mental health and for helping to decrease her anxiety and her stress. And she was able to come at a time when she was able to, based on how she was feeling. And that rang so close to home for me because in the last year, I've really experienced a high increase in my anxiety. And I had my first panic attack this past summer. It was something I never experienced before and really took me like out of my body into this wild instability and uncertainty. And I mean, what actually worked for me in that moment was going into the water and bringing myself back into my body through like the water, moving my hands through the water. And that was kind of a meditation and a practice for me there is being able to move my body and start to feel my breath moving through and take my awareness out of these uncontrollable thoughts and stress and bring them back into my physical body and my breath. And I think the yoga practice can be so beneficial for that. And the poses itself, because they can take your awareness into your physical body so that you can shift away from that fear, that anger, that depression, that sadness, and you can bring your awareness into your physical body because the mind can only focus on one thing at a time. So if we're bringing it into the physical body and just moving in an intentional way through these shapes, then it takes us out of that experience. If we do the breath work, then again, we bring our mind to focusing on the breath, moving in and out, our inhale and our exhale. And then if it's comfortable to do so, and we can bring our awareness into those thoughts. So in our meditation, if we can be in a bit of that discomfort, then we can look at those emotions, look at those experiences a little bit deeper, maybe recognize where they're coming from, and then be able to let them go and let them fade away and come back into the stillness and the quiet. It's the meditation practice, I think, can be so beneficial for this in being in a little bit of that discomfort. I think that there's a time and place when people are able to sit in that and a time and place when people aren't because of what's going on with their mental health. But if we can come to this practice of meditation, I think it's so beautiful to sit in the discomfort and the emotions that we're experiencing. Because there's a lot of ways in our life that we can distract ourselves. We can watch TV, we can play games, we can go on social media. And there's a lot of good that can come from some of those things. But if we're using it as a way to just distract ourselves from the challenges we're having instead of facing them, then it just leads to more struggles, more problems. And coming to that meditation practice can really allow us to, and I can just speak for myself too here, can really allow myself to be in that discomfort, be in, for me, a lot, it's like the fear, the anxiety, the stress. If I can be in that and start to name where it's coming from or what's causing it, and then have these tools like yoga that can balance me out. It can find that state of calm, that state of peace, that state of joy and happiness. Then it gets easier to experience that anxiety because it comes back still. I think that I've gotten a lot better in the past few months since I had that panic attack this summer. But it's a work in progress. It's something that I'm going to be working on every day, and I get better and better and find more ease and more peace. oftentimes quicker, but it's all a practice.
Yeah, it's all a practice
Yeah.
without question. And there's such a big difference between, if one person experiences anxiety or a panic attack, and their automatic behavior would be to distract themselves or to do
Mhm.
something different in regards to kind of ignoring the feelings that are coming up quite strongly within the body and the mind. Although, on the
Mhm.
other hand, somebody who's experiencing anxiety or in a panic attack and they use some of these tools, whether that's meditation or yoga, or changing your environment using nature, for example, how rather than like suppressing and ignoring and distracting yourself, you're able to bring awareness to those feelings and the thoughts and the things that have made you feel that way, and begin to digest and eliminate some of those things. There's a very different neurological process that happens, and you're using lots of different brain and body chemistry when it comes to going down one path or the other. And just
Mm.
having a tool like yoga, or a space to meditate, or to do some of these other things, can be so remarkable and life changing for those people who do. And a lot of people experience anxiety and depressions and all sorts of other things, mental health related and physically related. But just having a tool like yoga or meditation is just can be really inspiring and can really help people help themselves.
Yeah, in my experience, it's so important to have your tool belt where you have your list of things that you can rely on in those situations that really take you out of yourself and get you caught up in your mind. Um, and I think just another thing to speak about the meditation is we often get this introduction as you go in and you just get quiet, and you go in and you just clear out everything, and it's super easy. You just go and you sit and you're silent. And for someone who has a lot of thoughts running in their mind, like myself, kind of hearing that like we're looking to achieve this state of quiet and peace can be really intimidating. And I had one great teacher, Clara. I'll probably speak a lot about her. And you kind of mentioned at the beginning, I'm doing my 300-hour teacher training with her this year. Is she talks about it in a way where we're like kind of turning on the TV. So we go in and we sit in our meditation, we turn on the TV and we're like, okay, what's coming up for me today? And you're able to just sit there and recognize the thoughts that come in, see if those thoughts are serving you, and practice being able to let them go. And that's kind of my meditation practice. I sit and I'm like, okay, what's coming up for me today? And there may be brief moments of the silence and the space. And that's so great. But oftentimes it's just another thought, one after another, that comes in. And that's so great to create the space to sit with them.
Yeah, we don't really get taught how to sit and analyze kind of what's going on in our head. I think we think and we believe that thoughts just continuously like happen to us. We don't have any control over them. I mean, a lot
Mm,
of the thoughts we do have are like sporadic neurons firing that you know a lot of the things we think about don't really mean anything. But a lot those
mm,
things that continuously come up to people that make us feel emotions that we don't really want to experience on a regular basis, yet sitting and becoming aware of those. And again, like sitting down and doing a meditation is a tool, but also how do you sit, and where are you putting your focus? Are you just sitting down and letting things fire, or you sitting back and, you say, like watching the show? And then
mm,
how can you could potentially like start assessing some of these thoughts? Because I think a lot of people who experience anxiety, I know a lot of anxieties that I've had in my life, and I really sit down and start using some ways to analyze those thoughts. Most of them that make me feel anxious don't have any validity to them, and
mm,
these thoughts are just random things firing in my head. And then once I can actually analyze that, I can kind of put them to the side and digest them, and eliminate them, rather than just suppressing them until they kind of pop up again. And
mm,
yeah, as we mentioned before, that is a very, very different process to feeling anxious feelings and thoughts, and then just like turning on turning on Netflix and distracting yourself. So, you know, you don't have to think about those things anymore. It's a
Yeah.
very different process.
Yeah, and I think it's just this conversation is reminding me that it's so good for us to talk about our experience within yoga, because I think that's what was challenging for me at the beginning is I was, getting from these teachers in this books how, it's kind of supposed to be kind of the path. And what has been life changing for me is talking to other yoga teachers about my experience in the practice. So it was so great in our teacher training this past year, one of our modules talking about meditation. And so many of us being like, yeah, I sit a lot of times and it's like chaotic. It's like thought, 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 thought. It's so busy. And hearing other teachers be like, my meditation is so busy was like, oh, thank goodness. Like I'm not alone in that. And similarity with our physical postures is being able to be like, oh, this one pose is so hard for me. And another teacher being like, or another student, anyone being like, oh yeah, same, or like, here's what works best for me. And like us being able to talk about our bodies and how they move. I think it's so great to, yes, like take this practice on yourself and figure out what works best for you in the practice, but talk to other people about your experiences so that you can, I think, for a lot of these things, see that you're not alone in your experiences and be able to seek out support from others too.
Yeah, that community-based aspect of something
Yeah.
like that is so impactful and helpful, because the things that you experience, everyone, I think most people can relate to the emotions of frustration and anger and rage that we have like internally, and we usually, because of society, we don't usually express those things. We kind of hide it and we suppress it a little bit. But being able to talk
Mm-hmm.
about the thoughts that lead to emotions like frustration, anger, and rage really allows you to okay, listen, I'm human, these things happen, but I can start to do things to actively help myself to maybe reduce those things and really assess what's actually making me feel angry and frustrated, and
Mm-hmm.
probably come to the realization that you actually have a lot more control and responsibility over that emotional state. And that takes work, that takes practice, that takes real conscious effort, but there are things that we can do, and there are people that can support us on the way, because we shouldn't be trying to make any significant change without using the wonderful support systems that exist all around us, whether that's family and friends or a yoga community. Yeah, it's really powerful stuff. I'd love to talk about some of the research done on using yoga for different mental health disorders. I think if you to type
Mm-hmm.
in yoga into PubMed or GreenMed Info or some of these other research-based databases, you find so much actual science, because the science is really catching up with the real health benefits that come from doing a practice like yoga.
Yeah, and um, it's so interesting too. A lot of the times when our like Western science needs that evidence and needs the proof with some of these ancient traditional sciences as well, and these practices, and sometimes it's really beneficial for people to get that concrete data based on um, a clinical trial or something like that, so that those people that are really focused on seeing the evidence, it can give them the reassurance that this can be a beneficial practice. And there is like the clinical trials, there is getting people, there is some research there that I was looking at specifically for healthcare workers and getting them into a regular yoga practice and how that decreased their stress and anxiety in the work that they're doing in the healthcare setting. And so there's amazing research and evidence like that. And then we have thousands of years of people practicing this practice and seeing the results there in increased mood, decreased stress, increase in good sleep, and increased in energy, reduced fatigue. There is the evidence there in just seeing from people doing the practice and sharing their experiences. So yes, you're so right, Simon. There is going into these great databases. You can be able to search yoga for mental health, yoga specifically for depression, yoga for things like Alzheimer's, yoga for all these conditions, and find definitely so much research now as people are wanting to gather people for a period of time, get them to do the practice and measure with specific studies to get their experience. And at the same time, we can look at this evidence from thousands of years of practice and see the results there too of how this is shifting people's moods and supporting their mental health.
Yeah, it's such an important thing to remember that these practices, these ancient practices, have been used for thousands of years, and that is, without question, scientific evidence that these things have strong, powerful healing mechanisms to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. I'd love to talk about how nutrition fits into all of this. So
Mm,
you and I have both done the holistic nutrition diploma at Pacific Rim College,
yeah.
and quite a remarkable place, an incredible course, changed my life without question. I'm sure it did the same with
Hmm.
you.
Hmm.
How does that holistic nutrition practice slip into and complement the yoga?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, so again, like this practice being so old, they knew from the beginning that nutrition was an amazing focus for the yoga practice and how it could benefit doing these shapes, being able to sit comfortably. I kind of referenced at the beginning of our conversation the yamas and niyamas and talking about, so the niyamas are the practices within the body and what you're doing for yourself. And one of the niyamas, tapas, talks about the removal of impurities in our physical and mental systems through the maintenance of such correct habits as sleep, exercise, nutrition, work, and relaxation. So this is from the Yoga Sutras that I was reading of Patanjali. And so they talk right about nutrition right there in this is one of like the first text on yoga, the Yoga Sutras. So right away they're talking about how do we put the right food in to support the physical body. And then we can also look at one of the sister sciences of yoga, Ayurveda. Simon and I both studied a little bit of that within the holistic nutrition diploma. And Ayurveda is such a great system that talks about um, figuring out your individual constitution and then looking at the qualities of food, whether they're hot, cold, light, heavy, damp, dry, looking at the taste, the sweet, sour, salty, and looking at the seasons and being able to choose the right foods for your right constitution, and then how that can benefit your yoga practice. So I think it's similar to talking about the right practice for the right time of day, the right season, is that we know our food can be used the same way. So if we are eating a really heavy meal right before our practice, then our body is working on digesting that food. And so we can't be then shifting our energy to move the body into these different shapes, to do the breath work, to be able to sit in meditation because our body's working on this other huge process of digestion. So it was so cool for me to be introduced to the yoga practice and then start to look more at the food that I was putting in my body and how that was affecting my ability to move my body, being able to put in light foods before I practice, and then being able to like add the really nourishing, heavier foods after my practice once I um, moved my body and then needed to replenish. So there's so much to say about
Yeah,
nutrition,
yeah,
but I
yeah.
think with Ayurveda is such a great system if people want to explore that more because it is that sister science of yoga. So they are so closely related in how one benefits the other, and looking at and figuring out your original constitution and looking at your current constitution and see what is needed for you at this time. And then you can even look at yoga practices that will complement your constitution too.
Yeah, that's
So,
amazing. I think
yeah.
that, yeah, I mean, the whole nutrition piece is huge. And without question. All these things really complement each other. Everything's connected. And yeah,
Hmm.
you wouldn't want to be going into a yoga studio and doing an hour practice, just after a massive triple burger or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But obviously,
Agreed.
it's about, and I think that just with the yoga and the meditation and the nutrition piece, it's all about becoming conscious. And once you start becoming conscious of your mind and your body, you're going to be able to be aware of like what it needs. Just like if you're going onto the yoga mat and you sit and you feel your body and you feel, okay, my legs are feeling really tight today. Maybe I should put some awareness and focus on that area of my body. You're going to be do that with nutrition, and your body is so incredibly smart. Whether it needs vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, it's gonna tell you what it needs. And if you're really really connected, you can use like looking in the eyes, looking in the tongues, looking at like pulse diagnosis with traditional Chinese medicine. These are all
Hmm.
messages that you can learn to do yourself, and go and study, and you can go to different amazing practitioners that can help you along with that. Do you have some like good resources that people can check out, whether that's books or YouTube channels, maybe other podcasts that people can check out if they're looking for maybe like an introduction to yoga?
Absolutely. Yeah, I would say first, it'd be so great if people are brand new to yoga, really curious about it, and want to try. There's so many videos on YouTube that are free. You can kind of explore in their different styles of yoga, whether it's yin, a slower practice, a vinyasa, a more vigorous, and ashtanga, even more vigorous, challenging, more restorative, slow flow. You can just kind of put in those keywords of different styles of yoga and find a whole bunch of classes that are free. So you can really start to explore the practice without, if you're not sure yet where you want to invest your money in, because I think it's all about finding a teacher that really resonates with you too. But of course, I would recommend my teacher, Clara Roberts Oss. She has an online platform. It's called Practice with Clara. And she has so many videos online. You do like a monthly subscription. I think it's about $15. And you get access to, she probably has hundreds of classes on there now. And they range from like 5 minutes mantra meditation breath work to hour and 15-minute classes. So there's such a range that she has on there that you can practice, and from various styles of slow flow to more vigorous, lots there. And then as far as books go, there's so many books too. I'm kind of looking over at my shelf where I have a lot of books right now and seeing what are some great ones. And one of my first books that I read was called The Heart of Yoga. And this is by Deshkachar, which he is the son of Krishnamacharya, one of our fathers of yoga. And this book is such a great summary of a lot of different concepts of yoga. So if you want to dig more into the philosophy, you want to learn more about the origins, you want to explore more beyond the physical practice, The Heart of Yoga is a really great book. And
Yeah, that's great. I mean,
yeah,
so as you say, you could type in yoga for beginners in YouTube, and you're gonna get 10,000 videos.
yeah,
So
that's a
it's
great point too. You can
yeah,
kind of like look at your experience level for beginners, intermediate, advanced. There's so
yeah,
much on there. Yeah.
and there's going to be something for everybody without question. It's a really wonderful, really wonderful example of how technology can really really work for us.
Yeah.
Um, that's great. I'll make sure that we leave the links to Clara and links to that book as well in the show
Yeah.
notes, so people can connect with them. How can people connect with you?
Yes, thank you for asking. So I'm currently teaching at the Fernwood Yoga Den in Victoria, BC. And what's so great about the Fernwood Yoga Den right now is we also have an online platform. So if people aren't local to Victoria, BC, they can still practice with me online in the comfort of your home. So you can go to the fernwoodyogaden.com. There's online classes. And then if you are local to Victoria, BC, then you can come in and attend classes with me.
That's awesome, and we'll make sure that
Yeah,
that link is shared as well. But
great.
that's it for our time together, Nicole. we could talk all day, especially about the nutrition piece. 'Cause I find that super
Yes.
fascinating, and I'm going to do my best to get an Ayurvedic practitioner on the show to discuss that a little bit further. But
Amazing.
yeah, but thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, Simon. This was so fun. Thank
Awesome.
you.
I'm glad you had fun. Yeah, I honestly think that yoga and teaching it to our youth and to our young adults can, without question, give people the tools that they need to help navigate what is very often a very stressful world in which we engage in very stressful emotions. And having
Mm,
tools, and a lot of that is very unavoidable. So having tools like meditation and yoga on hand, and to be able to do that kind of quickly at home rather than having to book a class and go to a class, but having these tools that we can just engage in very, very quickly, and do them at a level where we are, really restoring and healing ourselves. I honestly think if we start teaching that to our youth, so much chronic adult illnesses will plummet. It will really
mm,
decrease, and it will just help help create a society that's a lot more connected to themselves, and therefore connected to our community. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some wonderful things with us. I've been excited about this episode for a while, and you didn't disappoint.
mm.
Um,
Thanks, Simon.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for listening, everybody. This is True Hope Cast, the official True Hope Canada podcast. We'll leave all the show notes and everything we've spoken about today in the description. So thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Goodbye.